We're streaming, right? We're streaming live. Hello, everybody out there in the stratosphere. I'm Sarah, and this is Chloe Melas, who's here to speak to us about her grandfather's book. I have a copy here, The Luck of the Draw, which I should have turned the camera around on that one so everyone could see it. Hi, Chloe. Thanks so much for joining us. How are you?
Hi. Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much. I've been waiting to do this for the last few days, so I'm so excited. I love the book nook, and so this is going to be a lot of fun, and thanks for having me.
Oh, fantastic. When did you arrive in the country?
So I arrived Wednesday, and it has been a whirlwind. I had a party for the book in Mayfair, like really swanky.
Wow.
And like we had some celebrities and influencers come and a lot of people from the World War II community that were there. And then Friday, we had a really busy day as well. And then I took the train up to Cambridge, and I am staying over here in an area called Mildenhall near the Air Force Base, where all of our American Air Force servicemen are located just about 5 minutes up the road from where I am, and I will be there tomorrow. And over the last few days, I've been to Duxford, to the Imperial War Museum, and I have been to Thorpe Abbotts, the Air Force base that my grandfather flew his missions out of. And then tomorrow, I will be speaking at Mildenhall.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, well, welcome to the country. It sounds like a full-on schedule of events because tonight is the eve of the 80th anniversary of that flight over Munster your grandfather took that last time, isn't it? Is
Yes,
that what?
I can't believe it's 80 years. And it's also so ironic that this is happening while I'm here. It's not like we planned for the book to publish now. It's not like we knew that I would be here around October 10th. I mean, the publisher, Elliott and Thompson, they picked October 5th, but they didn't pick it because of Black Week, which is what we are in right now, Black Week.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. A little bit more of these names that have sort of been thrown around in the story. They've got some really dark meanings behind them as well. Did you want to tell us what Black Week means?
Yeah, so Black Week, there are a series of missions, and the 8th Air Force lost hundreds of aircraft and thousands of men. And this was a week of many casualties. And so, on the mission that my grandfather went on, which will be tomorrow, like we said, it was October 10th, it was in the morning, and they were flying to Munster, Germany. And this was my grandfather, particularly his 21st mission. And you only have to fly 25 to be able to go home. So he was almost done with his tour. And so he flew 21 missions. That morning was his 21st, and they encountered a lot of heavy flak. When you see Masters of the Air, you'll understand what I'm talking about. It's a lot of a lot of bullets and different weapons coming towards them that create the black flak and the smoke around them all through the sky. And they were going to blow up a ball bearing factory in Munster, and a railroad stations, railway stations. I can't speak today, to really try to slow down the Nazis and to slow down the German offensive. And so my grandfather, they take off that morning, and they were met with so many different Luftwaffe and fighter pilots, and all around them. And somehow they managed to strike their target, but unfortunately, their plane was so badly hit and badly damaged that my grandfather and many of the men on that aircraft, it was called All Argo. The plane has a funny name, AWRGO. My grandfather writes in the book that nobody knows what on earth the name of that plane means at all, if it's somebody's initials. Anyway, my grandfather parachuted out that day. Unfortunately, two men on his plane that day died, at the tail gunner and the radio operator. So Yeah, tomorrow is obviously very, very significant for our family, and it's a huge part of the book because this is something that he writes about. He writes about parachuting out of the aircraft that was on fire. My grandfather, his arm was injured by shrapnel, and this was the beginning of what would be the next 18 months for him because he was immediately captured and became a prisoner of war.
Oh yeah, it's an incredible story. Even just that moment where how your grandfather describes it is pretty incredible. The moment where it's almost like these few minutes when he realizes that they need to get out of the plane is going down. It seems like almost time stops and it's moving in slow motion and he doesn't realize what's going on, but he knows they've been hit because he's been hit. And someone just walks down the plane and says, "We're out," basically. And then it's not where it ends. He doesn't just go poof out the plane, he lands on the ground. There's this whole, he looks over at the abyss of the ground that's like 23,000 feet below him and then has to go, "I have to jump." And he's not just jumping into this like he does say it's silent for a moment, but then he gets shot at, and there's another plane that comes up alongside him, and then all hell breaks loose once he hits the ground, and his whole life tumbles into he's not just a young man who's become a navigator in a plane, he's now a prisoner of war, and that just made such a huge transition in your whole identity and what you're faced with in life. It's just such an incredible story. And what's terrible though is he's just one of hundreds or thousands of young men who have been through a similar experience. It's pretty incredible that your grandfather's been able to write about it, and now it's going to be a story that's going to be shared with so many people, and a different audience as well are going to be engaged in his story with this Apple TV series that's coming out in January as well.
I
Very.
know, I know. We're all so excited for this. Oh my gosh, the writer, John Orloff, and everyone who has worked so hard to make this series happen. I am so excited for all of these guys to go out and promote Masters of the Air and to be able to watch the whole series with everybody, to have everybody learning about what I've been posting about all of these years, about the 100th Bomb Group, about the 8th Air Force. And I'm sure so many people are like, what are you talking about? Like, I've heard of too, but I don't know what you're talking about. And, if you know anything about the 8th Air Force, or for those of you that don't, the 8th Air Force is like an umbrella. And within the 8th Air Force are different bomb groups, and they all have just different numbers. So the 100th is not something any more special than any other bomb group, but it happened to be 100, and it got the nickname later on of the Bloody Hundredth. Now, that is a bit of folklore. No one knows why it's called the Bloody Hundredth. It did not have the most amount of casualties. But within every bomb group, there are squadrons. And so my grandfather was in the 418th Squadron. So you will see the show that will talk about, it's focused on the men of the 100th, but there are different groups within the 100th. I don't know how many men are in each squadron or how many men were in the 100th, so that's a little above my knowledge. I would assume like a couple thousand. And like you said, 26,000 men died, right? And obviously thousands more captured and prisoners of war. And my grandfather writes in the book about what it's like to be there and to just have these days turn into weeks, turn into months, turn into almost 2 years, not knowing, are you going to spend another Christmas in here? When are you going to get a family? And then figuring out in the book, as you're reading, you learn that he's written home to his parents, and then his parents write him a letter, which clearly shows that they never even got some of his telegrams, right? So he would get a letter on Christmas, but it was really intended for him to be received the Christmas before, right? So that's just so depressing for them over there, because you just don't know when it's going to end, and the food is terrible. They're freezing cold. They have,
Ugh,
one or
yeah.
one or two pairs of shirts, one or two pairs of pants, one pair of boots. And he's writing for things like, could you send me a pair of socks? Could you send me some spices? Could you send me some chocolate? And it really kind of puts things into perspective. And something that I really find touching in the book, and, for those that like military history, there sure is a lot of detail about the aircrafts and the missions, and there's plenty of that. But I really love the telegrams, and I love him talking about music. So he feels like, or at least he had told me, his pastimes were spent. I mean, look, you have a lot of downtime, you have a lot of free time in the prison camp. And so my grandfather had played music his whole life, and he ended up playing music for the rest of his life once he returned home from the war. But he was in the prisoner of war band, and the Red Cross had instruments. So that's something where there's some really neat pictures of him in the book playing in the band. And that is something really, really special in the book.
I was really interested, as you said, the book it's quite heavy with factual information, and no matter how many times you read it, you're like, what? The numbers? No more. But I was really, really interested and fascinated by your grandfather's his mindset, his personality. Like that's what shines through, and it's his personal story and his personal journey that I find so fascinating. And it's the difference between him making something of the situation he was in, and also being able to adapt to a somewhat, a satisfying, fantastic life with great relationships by the sound of it with his own family to come after that. I find that super inspiring in a way. He must have really, and to have music, I suppose, is just one small creative outlet that bonds you with other people, and you're producing something that brings other people joy. That was a really fascinating part of the story as well. I wish I could play an instrument, that's for sure.
Yeah, I played piano growing up, but I wasn't all that good. But I would say, I would say, what's so interesting about this project is that my grandfather wrote this book for us, for the kids and the family. This really was never intended to be published on a wide scale. But my grandfather was a really good writer and obviously a very, very thorough researcher. He was a lawyer, and obviously incredibly smart and meticulous, but he traveled all across the country and did enormous research with historians. And it is heavy on a lot of the detail and the data and the numbers. But, again, I think that he just was really trying to put it out there as truthfully and as factually as possible. So there are those moments of heart where he's writing about growing up in Atlanta, Georgia, or he's writing about, not having good enough eyesight to be a pilot, and then he has to become a navigator, or those moments in the prisoner of war camp, or the moments on the death march from one prison camp to another. Of course, as a journalist too, I want a lot more of that, right? But I think that what you'll find is something in there for everyone. So if you're somebody that really doesn't want a lot of the mushy stuff, and you want more of the detail, you want to see, really what these guys were doing, and we have these appendices in the back of the book. The person's computer that I'm using right now, Mike Faley, he's a historian. He worked on Masters of the Air, and he's really involved with the 100th Bomb Group. It's a foundation that exists now, and they do reunions, and so family members of these men get together every 2 years. And so I've gotten to know a lot of people through this. He helped me with those appendices. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing. I'm like on the computer writing how many men were killed in action of these planes and were missing, and it's just, oh my
And you
gosh.
put that together, did you?
So it already had existed. My
Yeah.
grandfather had already done it before he died, but then we updated them because obviously there's been a lot more information since my grandfather wrote the book 20 years
Yeah.
ago. And so I remember right before we turned in the manuscript, I was looking at it, and I was on the phone with a woman named Nancy who also helped with the book. And all of a sudden I said, something's not right. All of these are wrong. They're on the wrong line. And so we had to the manuscript was due that day, so I had to physically go in and
Oh.
like an Excel spreadsheet. If you have the books, go flip to the end, you'll know what I'm talking about. But man, I've learned so much. And, even like looking for the photos that my grandfather used in the book, I had to go around my grandmother's house and look for them. I was looking for the pictures everywhere. I couldn't find them. And I was so worried because there were these small little black and white photographs in the book that he had self published. And so you really need the original ones to be able to print these big,
Mm,
pretty photos, or else they're
yeah.
really going to blurry. And so I was searching all around the house and I said to my grandmother, I can't find them. I'm so upset. And she said, have you checked the guest room on the desk? And she's wheelchair bound and she's now 93. At the time, she was maybe 89. And I said, no, I haven't checked there. So I went and I looked, and on the desk was a box, and on the side of the box said photos for luck of the draw. And I couldn't believe it. I'm like, are you kidding me? So he they've been sitting here for like 20 years or something. Crazy.
Wow.
Anyway,
Wow.
fun little stories like that.
It sounds like, yeah, a mammoth project, even just to put together and revitalize what he'd already, all the hard work and research he'd already done so meticulously as well. So hats off to you and everyone who helped out as well. It's fantastic that, it is such, it's in some parts quite heavy with the facts and the information, which is necessary for the story itself. But it's quite nice now that it's going to be turned into more of a brought that story to life. It's going to be entertaining and engaging for a new generation of people as well. What was the name of the actor who will be playing your grandfather, Frank?
Yes. Oh, he's wonderful. His name is Jonas Moore, and he is from England. We've never met. We've only corresponded through social media and things like that. But I know that I will meet him one of these days. I tried to see him while I was here, but he's not around. He's not in town, which was so unfortunate because I wanted him to come with me to Thorpe Abbott's. But hopefully, I'm an entertainment reporter coincidentally. So hopefully our paths will cross either at the premiere for Masters of the Air. There will be some reason for us to meet, but he did a brilliant job from what I've been told. Um,
Yeah.
and I actually got to go to the set in England during the pandemic in Northern
Ooh,
England, and that was just so incredible to just see the sets. So much time and care was taken to rebuild the prison camps, to rebuild the entire all of Thorpe Abbott's. Thorpe Abbott's, if you Google it, it's the air traffic control tower in the air base that still exists today in East Anglia. And it's about an hour from where I am now. And I was there just a few days ago, and I will be there again
wow.
tomorrow afternoon. And it still is there. I mean, the runway is overgrown. But they rebuilt the air traffic control tower in the 80s, and they turned it into a little museum. It's beautiful. But we went out in an authentic World War II Jeep, and we went around the other day, and we went to where my grandfather's bunker would have been, where the barracks would have been, where he would have slept. It's all just a forest now. But there are Nissen huts, and there are other buildings that you can walk into that, I mean, the ceiling might collapse, but if you go and you walk around, it's really amazing. I actually took a bunch of pictures. I'm going to post them on Instagram. It's like stepping back in time into a history book. It's wild, and it's on private property. That part of the airfield, it's owned
Hmm.
by somebody like Sir something something, some family.
Of course.
Permission though to like go onto the land with the World War II Jeep. Um, so they were like, "Oh, they shoot pheasants out here, so you need to be careful." And I'm like, "Oh my god, like what?" I'm like walking around in the woods. I don't want them to like think I'm a bird, and I was so worried.
And have you visited the places in Germany that your grandfather has been to, like, yeah, Sagan and Munster and Frankfurt?
So I love that you're actually the person to ever ask me this question, and I love it because it's something new that I've never been asked before. No, I haven't, and it's never really crossed my mind until recently that I need to add those to the list. So I would probably say that first up would be Munster, to go to the farmer's field where he was shot down.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah.
in the in the book, I don't want to spoil it, but in the book, my grandfather goes back to the farmers, um, and he befriends them, and he goes back to the farmhouse decades later. So you will read about that in the book, about what that was like for him as an adult man, a father, to go back married to see where he was shot down. So I would like to go there. I would like to go to where Stalag Luft 3 was and Stalag 7A. I've been told that I think that there are museums there now, but the actual prison camps don't exist anymore.
Yeah. It would be really interesting. I feel like the main station at Frankfurt is probably, Hitler would hate it. It's like Frankfurt would be the antithesis of what he was trying to achieve during World War II. The amount of people from all over the world who passed through that station would just be incredible and drive him nuts. That's for sure. Yeah, well, that'd be fantastic if you were able to go back there. You did answer one of my questions that I had earlier, which was at what stage and for what reason did your grandfather start writing about his experience? Why did he do that? What compelled him to start putting pen to paper and letting those experience and memories come back out really? And yeah, you mentioned it was grandkids. I thought that might have been something to do with it as well.
He did this in retirement. So he retired from Lockheed Martin, where he was working with airplanes overseas in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia. He retired in the 80s, and in the late 90s, about a decade later, is when I was about 10 years old, when he started writing the book on a typewriter in the basement. He had an office in his basement. I think it was something to do, something to stimulate him. He read a lot of books. He had been going to the 100th Bomb Group reunions now for about a decade at this point. So I think at this moment in his life, I think he said, "I want to write this down for the children and for the grandchildren." He had 4 children. He had 7 grandchildren. I was like kind of smack dab towards the end, number 5. And I remember him working on the book, but at the time, I don't think any of us really thought much of it. I think that we just thought, like, this is a passion project of grandpa's that he's just going to go print at the local print shop and find it himself, and that'll be that, and it'll be put on a shelf somewhere, and maybe somebody will read it. No one really thought much of it, but when he did put it out, and when he did self-publish it, and he sent it to his children were shocked to read what he had been through. And I did not read it at the time. I believe I was about 16 years old when it came out. Read it though in college, and in college is also when I was studying abroad in London. I was living in London for a semester. And so when I was living there it was in the summer, I decided to go to Thorpe Abbotts one weekend to see the Air Force Base that he flew out of. And remember, I had listened to these stories my whole life, my grandfather telling me and regaling me with the stories. But I never thought to really read the book because I had my grandfather. I figured, why do I need to read the book? He's told me everything. But I read the book and I obviously learned a lot that I didn't know. And then when I went to Thorpe Abbotts and I saw where it was, I was really moved by it. And I was intrigued by it. And that, I guess, was the beginning of me really being interested in my grandfather's story. And then he died the year after. I write about it in the foreword. He died the year after I visited Thorpe Abbott. So I'm so glad that I got to go and that he knew that I went. That was really great.
That's so fantastic. It just sort of comes full circle for him as well. I've just been passed a question from somebody else in the household. Um, have you ever been in a B-17 Flying Fortress?
Yes, I have.
And obviously had the chance to sit where your grandfather would have sat.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. So I did. Now, I've never been in one that has flown. I've never been in one that has taken off before. Okay. So
Mm.
I have not done that. I don't know if I would feel comfortable doing that, but I have, been in a B-17. They have a beautiful B-17 at the Mighty Eighth Air Force Museum in Savannah, Georgia. I serve on the board of directors there. It is a
Oh,
beautiful museum. My
yeah.
grandfather loved that museum,
Oh,
and
that's so fantastic.
a gorgeous B-17, and if you ask politely, they will remove the rope and maybe let you in, especially if you have a child with you, let you go up the step.
Yeah.
And I sat at the navigator's table, and it's so cramped in there, and it's all
Is
metal
it?
around you. It's dangerous being inside when it feels like. So I can only imagine what it's like to be in an unpressurized airplane, 20,000 something feet in the air, and it's
Yeah.
freezing cold, and you're in all of cumbersome flight suit and your hat and you have your weapons and your boots. I mean, I cannot imagine. And then, like you said, you're injured or you have to bail out. I mean, it's wild.
It is pretty incredible. Something that really struck me because I was lagging a bit when it came to the details of the communications and the radars and the Germans watching out from there, and the communication was just so slow and the technology was so slow, and I just found it must have been so much harder just to keep people coordinated and keep them safe as well. And I think in a previous interview, you might have mentioned something around it was a change in decision making where they went from night bombing to day bombing, and the potential not so great consequences of just flying out into day like sitting ducks really as they were coming down. It was almost sad, the build up to when they flew out that morning, that Sunday morning, and always he talks a few times about how what a lovely day it was and how calm it was, and they got up in these rickety old planes basically, and there weren't many of them left, and they went straight towards the Germans who were just waiting for them, who knew they were coming.
Yeah, and you're going to learn more about that when you finally do get to watch the series, Masters of the Air, the TV show that comes out in January on Apple TV. Um, and it stars Austin Butler and a lot of really great actors. You will see for yourself what this means, these daylight bombing missions. My grandmother says that these were suicide missions. I mean, these boys were going up in the sky. I call them boys because they were barely 18, 19 years old, and they were flying in the middle of the day, and the Luftwaffe was just picking them off like sitting ducks, like you said. And so the British were bombing at night. But the Americans believed that if they did strategic daylight bombing, that they would be able to hit their targets more accurately. Now, as for whether they did, I think that there is enough evidence to support that it was ultimately the way to win the war. The war was an air war up until D-Day.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this wasn't a war. I mean, really, it's the men of the skies that won the war.
Yeah, I suppose that answers my next question as to, how effective was this sending all these young boys? Your grandfather was 22 when he flew out that day. And so I imagine the average age was around 22 years old. So they're very young. They're young boys going out there doing some incredible things. As you mentioned before, the line from Tom Hanks on the front cover of the book. How did these boys do this? And reading your granddad's book, you're just like, I don't know. Would I be the same? Could I be the same in that sort of situation? How did they keep it together? It's just an incredible story. I have a question here. Um, as well as your granddad's story, Masters of the Air is also air. It's my funny accent. Sorry if someone doesn't understand. It's AIR, and it's based on Donald Miller's book as well. Did your grandfather meet him?
Ah, yes, Don Miller is a family friend, and he is alive, and he is incredible. He is an amazing historian, and he has written many books about many different topics. But he took an interest in World War II, and he took a specific interest in the Mighty Eighth Air Force. And he wrote a book called Masters of the Air. And in the book is where he writes about the 100th bomb group. And he interviewed my grandfather for his book. His book came out a year after my grandfather died. So unfortunately, my grandfather
Oh, wow.
Masters of the Air. But Masters of the Air became a New York Times bestseller. And Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg, they read that book and then they decided that they wanted to turn this into, like Band of Brothers or The Pacific. And so that was back in 2007. And here we are, 2023, and it's coming out in 2024. So look at all the time that has passed, how long this project's taken to do, because they wanted to get it right and it cost so much money to make, and they didn't want to just throw this together. And so Dawn has been really supportive. Dawn gave a beautiful quote for the book. I think you can see it on Amazon. I don't have it in front of me, but Dawn, we have his quote on the back cover of the American version. So there's a US version of the book that came out at the end of February, and then there's this version here in the UK that has come out just now on Thursday. Yeah, he's been so supportive of this entire project and helping me and my mother re-release and get it published. And he's a really, really great person. And it's actually really done where a lot of this started for me. I was in Atlanta, Georgia. I decided to go listen to Don speak at the Atlanta History Museum. And I was listening to him speak and sign books and the racked. And he didn't know who I was. And I was in my 20s. And I went up and introduced myself afterwards because he happened to mention my grandfather while I was sitting in the audience. And it gave me goosebumps. And I was there, and my mother was there, my grandmother was there. And then I went up to him afterwards, and we exchanged information. And we ended up meeting up when he came to New York, and I was living in New York at the time. And he was the one that was really telling me all about the TV series. And this was when I was, 26 years old. So this is 10 years ago. And so that's when I really decided I need to publish this book. I need to start this process of publishing the book, especially if there's a TV show coming out. And here we are, where it's all sort of coinciding, very coincidentally, around the same time.
And just to remind everyone, that's the 26th of January. That will be released on Apple TV. So that'll be so fantastic. I have seen some episodes of The Pacific.
Ooh.
And that, oh my gosh, the stories that have just, we haven't heard until now. It's just blows your mind what's, these young men have been through and what they just continue to sign up for. It's interesting for me because last week I spoke to an author. She wrote about the Spanish Civil War. So the whole time period between the First World War to the Spanish Civil War, which was like Hitler's little playground where he practiced a lot of his bombing, through to the Second World War. It's just such a sad time in history, and just a waste of life and the families who were affected afterwards. I think of all the families who were left behind when their boys were off at war. And as you were talking about how in your grandfather's group, they had to fly 25 missions. And the chances of them making 25 missions and coming back home safely were almost none. The odds were just stacked against them. So for your grandfather to get to 21 was just an incredible feat to be able to get that far and still survive.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the title of the book. I mean, it really, really, really came down to luck. And I think that what gets me every time when I talk about it or when I go to Thorpe Abbott's and I'm walking around is just the fact that if my grandfather on October 10th, which is tomorrow, when he flew his final mission, what if he died instead of the tail gunner? What if he died instead of the radio operator? I wouldn't be here today talking to you. Life is so fleeting. Life is so short. I mean, every single time I turn on the news, we're watching Israel and Palestine are fighting right now, or the war in Ukraine. I mean, let's just hope that we never see a World War III, and let's just hope that something like World War II never happens again. And the world is a very dangerous and scary place. And I think that we really need to appreciate our military and those that fight for our freedom. It is not just World War II that had heroes. There are modern day heroes walking among us every day. And I think it's just really important for us to talk to the veterans in our lives, whether it's someone who served in Vietnam or in Iraqi freedom or Afghanistan, or someone who's currently helping out overseas now. I think that we need to just say thank you for your service. I think that we need to really ask them questions and talk to them. And I think that I think that most people want to talk about it, but they don't know how. And so we really need to try to preserve these stories, talk about this, and talk to the veterans in our life. And I also think that everybody has a story to tell. So I would encourage everybody out there to, if you don't want to keep a diary or you don't want to write things down, I get it. But if you want to just take your phone and just record into your phone, or go find that uncle or go find that aunt. It's not just men, it's women who helped on the ground, or who helped in the medical field, or women today who serve in the armed forces. Let's think of the women in our lives too, but go and interview someone on tape recorder or on your phone, because you never know a future generation like myself, like a grandchild, that they might come along and want to tell that story or use it for something. So I think that that's really important. My grandfather was special to me, but he was nobody special. He was, as he wrote in the book, just a everyday citizen who enlisted.
Oh no, we've lost Chloe. We'll have to get Chloe back. Wee Chloe. I'm sure she'll join us in just a moment.
You.
Shame, she was onto something great there. Here she comes. She's back. I don't know what happened there. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I don't know where we left off, but all I was saying is that my grandfather's story is special because he wrote it down. So for
Yeah.
anybody out there, I mean, that is the key. He wrote it down. If he didn't write it down, I wouldn't be here right now with you all talking about it. So that is what makes it special. That is what makes it different. So really, like I said, record yourself on your phone, record your uncle, record your aunt, ask them questions, because you never know what future generation is going to be in using the story for something. Maybe a podcast, an article, a school essay, a school project, or even just your own family book that you want to publish. Again, even if my grandfather had simply just on the shelf and self-published it, and that is all that ever became, what a wonderful piece of history and what a wonderful gift for future generations in the family to have. I really would encourage everyone to share their stories, and it doesn't just have to be something about the war. We all just lived through the COVID-19 pandemic. No matter what you believe when it comes to COVID, that was an interesting time in our lives. And so, again, if you wanted to just share what your life was like, record it into your phone and save that somewhere. I think everybody has a special story.
Yeah, I agree. And you never know what you may have experienced, no matter how small or insignificant you feel it might be relatable or mean something to someone else, or make them have understanding for other people as well. And I think we end up in a lot of these wars because of a lack of understanding of other people and intolerance to them as well. And if we don't talk to each other about all subjects, great and small, then we'll have less empathy and less connection with other people, whether they're alive or the people who came before us as well. And I think it's very important for humans to have that shared connection and that shared story that goes down through the generations. It's kind of what makes us human as well. I think, especially in a lot of the hotbeds, not to get into politics or anything, it's always been a case of power and rigid and flexibility and unlikely to adapt to different people around you. It's a shame, and I hope that we don't end up in a similar situation or same situation as what your grandfather had to go through during World War II as well. Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
definitely a story. As you said, he's not particularly a special human being, although he's absolutely special to you. But his story absolutely needs to be told, it needs to be shared. And yeah, more of them, really. Can't be a bad thing for us to understand what happened before us.
I agree. History repeats itself, and it's been such an honor to be able to talk about this book that my grandfather was writing in his basement during retirement. And here I am in England talking to you. And I walked into this very famous bookstore today called Waterstone or I know it's a chain, but it's this beautiful bookstore. And I was there in Cambridge, and I saw it on the table, right? And you have the
Yeah,
book right there with you. I mean, it's so amazing to be able to see this project through. I can't believe that this idea that I had has now come to fruition thanks to so many
yeah,
wonderful, wonderful people like Elliot and Thompson, or like Macmillan back in the States, or Mike and Nancy, and all these people who knew my grandfather, who came together once again to open up the book and to help make this happen. It's been man, I mean, what a ride it's been. It's been several years, and we're getting to the end of it now. And I'm kind of sad for it to end, but I hope that everybody reads the book and shares it. This has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
to be fair, this has just been such an amazing experience for me. I feel incredibly lucky to be able to be speaking with you tonight, especially on the eve of the 80th anniversary tomorrow, and finally have a release date for this TV series. But I can see it's just such an incredible project for you to take on. It's not just about your grandfather who's written his memoirs down. It's there out in the world because of you and a group of people who believed it could happen and should happen. And your mother was quite involved, was she, in getting this book published as well?
Yeah, I mean, look, if I didn't have her support, I wouldn't have been able to kind of take the football, the American football, right? Not the British football, but we can call it whichever football you want, but take it to the finish line. My mother and I went to her, and then I said, why don't we write the foreword together? I don't want to do it by myself. Let's do it together. So we wrote the joint foreword together. And I've just sort of been like, all right, this is where we're going next. This is where she's been, happy to do it. I wish she could have come with me here to the UK, but my grandmother is quite old. She's 93, and she has a lot of health issues now, so my mom has to stay behind with her in Atlanta. But I hope we know that she knows what's going on, and we know that she knows the book has become a big success, and now we just want
Good.
her to hold on, to see the series. Really, really want her to stick around, so that she can, stick around as long as she can, but especially so that she can see the series in January, because she's heard about it for so many years, and I know she can't wait to see it.
Oh, yeah, that would be absolutely fantastic. And I've just got to say, being a foreigner, going to Cambridge, like the heart of what you like, intellectuals, idealism, and it's such a stunning place. I can imagine seeing, like, what is in some ways, it's your book too, on a bookshop, like in a bookshop like that on a table would just be one of the most satisfying experiences ever. Oh, we've lost Chloe again. I've got a couple of questions for her, so she must come back as soon as she can. If anybody has any questions that they would like me to ask Chloe, please message us or type it into the chat. And hopefully we'll get Chloe back just for a few more moments before we let her go for good and have a nap, because I'm sure she's going to be very, very busy tomorrow and over the next few days. Chloe. I'll just send her a message and see if she's going to come back and join us. Chloe, are you there? It may be her internet connection. We have Chloe. She's calling me. Hello, Chloe.
Yeah, I got kicked off. I don't know how.
Oh no. I'm just wondering how we can bring you back on. Is that
Well, I mean, we did it for almost an hour. I don't know if she wants to just say something to end it because I'm sure people are watching. Does she want to?
would you like me
talk to her?
Yes.
Or is this you?
This is me.
Are you? Oh, this is you.
Yeah.
You just want to tell everyone. I don't know what happened. There was no way. I don't know how to get back on.
No worries. I will pass it on. I've got you on speakerphone at the moment. So everyone, I've got Chloe on speakerphone through WhatsApp. Well, I've rudely kicked her off, which is not how I wanted to end things. But we can't seem to get Chloe back on in the immediate future. So I'm going to say goodbye from Chloe, if that's okay.
Can they hear me? Can they hear me if I talk through your phone?
I think so. Yes, I'm just holding the speaker up too. Go.
I just can't thank you guys all enough for supporting Luck of the Draw.
You're actually coming back. I think you might be coming back.
Oh, I don't know. Let me see. I don't know.
We might be waiting a little.
Well, maybe I can try. Let me see.
Okay, everybody, sorry for the technical difficulties at the moment. We're just going to give it maybe 30 more seconds to see if we can get Chloe back. I think this may be an internet connection problem. She did say she's in the north of England. Nope, I think I might try and call her back so she can say her final farewells to you.
Hi, so I think I'm logging back in now.
Okay.
To say goodbye. I don't know if it'll work. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm back on.
I'm going to hold your book up. I think I've got it back to front. There we go. So everybody, just to let you know that Chloe's grandfather's book, Luck of the Draw, you can purchase it. It's £5 off at the moment. You can either purchase it through our Facebook shop or on our webpage, or pop into the store down on High Street in Ware. We are the only independent bookshop in East Hearts, so please come down and support our little bookshop. We do it for the joy of it, really, and to make new friends and to learn new things. So I think, unfortunately, Chloe's not going to be able to get back on by the looks of it. So please, if you've got any more questions, feel free to message us them through Facebook, and we'll pass them over to Chloe, who can get back to us. But until then, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm just going to see if Chloe has something finally that she'd like to say.
I'm inside the program. If you can add me back in.
I'm just having problems here. It's not connecting. I've got really bad feedback.
Okay, that's
okay. All right, thank you everybody for joining us this evening. Sorry about the technical difficulties at the end. Again, please head to the website or pop into the bookshop anytime and pick up a copy of Luck of the Draw. £5 off at the moment, so get in while you can. It's a beautiful hardcover version, and the Apple TV series is coming out on January 26. Bye for now.